there, and welcome to another Loofy vlog. I am Seleuf, the Floofy Loofy, and today I'll be talking about dragons! But what about dragons? We're doing it! It's great, we're doing it. This is dragons, about dragons. Here we are, here be dragons. Shush. Dragons. Dragons are awesome. Why? Because we made them that way. Let's start at the beginning. There are a lot of thoughts regarding the true origins of dragons. The two I find most interesting are 1. They are a chimera of our most primal fears. When I say chimera, you might be thinking of a specific creature in Greek mythology or Dungeons and Dragons, but the word really just means a combination of two or more creatures. Lion head, goat body, and snake tail? Chimera. Human spliced together with a horse? Chimera. Snake head, carnivora body, and raptor wings? Chimera. And right there, that last one, is everything that preyed on our ancestors from the end of the dinosaurs to the beginning of humanity. So if you're looking to make a monster of monsters, a king of all monsters if you will, what better than an amalgamation of all our most primal fears? Support for that theory comes in the form of how so many people are afraid of snakes all across the world, even from a very young age, even if they've never seen a snake before. However, it kind of breaks apart when you consider how many people are not afraid of birds and cats. 2. People found dinosaur bones, and their imaginations went wild. People have a tendency to exaggerate things, even when the things they're exaggerating are fantastic as it is. So when people found the fossilized remains of these giant lizard-like monsters, clearly they must be dragons. I especially like how these two lines of thought do not necessarily contradict each other. We might have had these chimera notions since forever, and when we found dinosaur bones, we thought them so scary that we added them to what was already supposed to be our worst collective nightmare. No! Dragons aren't chimeras or dinosaurs or snakes. Dragons are dragons! You're wrong! Is that so? Like a lot of mythological creatures, what they are has changed considerably over the eons. This, right here, this classic Western dragon, is an invention of the High Middle Ages based on a conflation of earlier dragons from different traditions. Before then, dragons in the West, and in a lot of places, were merely giant serpents. Some had legs, some had wings, but mostly they were big-ass snakes. The word for dragon comes from Latin and Greek words for serpent, huge snake, and giant sea fish of all things. Medieval knights who slew dragons were actually fighting large monitor lizards far from their homelands. When telling the stories back home, the stories got embellished with tremendous sizes, fire, and wings, and made these reptiles into truly terrible lizards. So from snakes to monitor lizards to, let's look at this modern Western dragon again. Long-ass neck and tail supported on a giant four-legged structure in the middle. Sounds a bit like a sauropod, but those talons, the digitigrade legs, that head, those look far more like a theropod. The wings get redesigned all the time, though the most common is a bat-like structure, because that just looks nice aesthetically with the scales. And why scales? Well, aside from lizards and snakes having scales, mammals don't. So putting scales on something automatically makes it a bit scarier just because it's less like us. We don't have feathers either, but feathers are still more like fur than scales are. They're soft. They're familiar in that way. Similarly, if you take all hair off something, like a cat, it's suddenly more foreign and alien and a bit scary and creepy to some people. That said, I am fully aware that a lot of people like hairless cats and lizards and snakes, and I myself keep pet mantises, so let's get back on topic. Dragons are not the same in every culture, or even throughout history. In fact, from Asia to Africa, they've retained a lot more of their serpentine origins. The Western dragon is actually quite unique in its design. It's also from the very end of the Western medieval times that we get a distinction between a dragon and a wyvern, that distinction being the number of legs, 4 or just 2. However, this distinction was quite localized to Great Britain and remains shaky to this day. If you've watched my video on elves and elves, you know I like distinctions, and I'm still upset the Hobbit movies changed Smaug from a four-legged dragon to a two-legged wyvern. The word wyvern is also derived from words for snakes, by the way. Wyrm, too. Likely because of the serpentine origins of both creature and names, cockatrices and basilisks are, shall we say, interestingly related to dragons. According to medieval texts, a cockatrice is supposedly born when a serpent hatches an egg that has been laid on a dunghill by a rooster. So, quite the impossible creature. Also, fun aside, the weasel is its mortal enemy. I didn't need to mention that, I just find it hilarious. The basilisk is a serpent with the head of a dragon at the end of its tail. So, swap that one around? Or second head? It's born when a toad hatches an egg that had been laid in a midden by a 9-year-old cockatrice. Medieval imaginations were weird. While many dragons in mythology are terrible monsters to be tamed or slain, many Asian dragons, most notably Chinese, are associated with power rather than evil, and are the symbols of gods and emperors. They are generous instead of greedy, admired instead of feared. Curiously, in China and Japan, dragons are associated with rain and water, whereas in India they're associated with drought. Now, because I overthink everything, let's talk about how dragons could potentially actually exist. As in, evolved. Taxonomically speaking, dragons are very weird. Maybe not impossible, but astronomically unlikely. Why? Because of the number of limbs. At some point way back in whenever, when multicellular life was just starting out, everything was tested. 2 limbs, 4 limbs, 6, 12, 14, too many to count. Hey man, whatever works. But as geological time went on, what worked stuck, and what didn't faded away, and genetic lineages got more and more set in their numbers. From the very first tetrapods to crawl up on land, through reptiliomorphs to dinosaurs and avians on one side, true reptiles on the other, and mammals somewhere in between, we all have the blueprints for 4 limbs and no more. Some may lose limbs, like snakes and whales, but not once, to our knowledge, in the history of life on Earth, has a vertebrate animal developed more limbs after crawling up on land. Conjoined twins notwithstanding. And yet, despite what Spore may tell you, repeating sequences are simple. Duplication is what genes do best. But we haven't seen it occur naturally in vertebrates in hundreds of millions of years. So, if we want to be consistent with that, dragons cannot be even remotely related to dinosaurs. They must have diverged from the vertebrates as we know them over 368 million years ago, back when vertebrates were still figuring out how many limbs they wanted. This means, if we're looking at a possible dragon origin, we start with a bony fish. What sort of fish would decide 6 is a good number of limbs? Not that anything was consciously deciding or even capable of comprehending the evolutionary paths, but stay with me here. How about a flying fish? The oldest known flying fish dates back as far as 242 million years. So it's not exactly a modern design. Still, we need to take it back even further by another 100 million years or so, and it would either be an ancestor to the flying fish we know today, or a case of convergent evolution. Either way, flying fish with 6 fins, 2 for gliding and 4 for swimming, leaping out of the water to avoid predators. Now we push them towards land, either through hunting pressure or shifting climate or competition for food. Closer to land, they could start preying on insects, as the oldest definitive insect fossil is 396 million years old. They may even have had powered flight already. So our flying fish could evolve a tactic for gliding over the beach to catch insects, then flopping back into the water. From there, they could evolve better flying, as they now have to dogfight with insects, as well as adapt their fins into proto-legs for better odds of getting back into the water. Eventually, they make the same leap as the tetrapods, with proper legs, necks, shelled eggs. Their fin wings become proper membrane wings, their legs lift their bodies off the ground, and we've got ourselves a proto-dragon. Depending on when this happens, tetrapods are either ahead of them or have to catch up with them, or this happens parallel to the tetrapods going onto land. Either way, from then on, the two branches eke out their existences on the planet side by side and likely preying on each other whenever the opportunity presents itself. Somewhere along the way, possibly after one or another mass extinction, the dragon lineages split and diversify. Some lose their forelimbs and become wyverns. In Asia, they lose their wings and become more serpentine. Some return to the sea and their limbs become flippers or recede entirely. These giant sea serpents are witnessed around the globe. Some just lose all their limbs despite staying on land and live like giant snakes. But how do they fly once they reach those huge sizes? Or lose their wings? Good question. Let's explore. Although dinosaurs, and by extension birds, are the only things we know of to evolve a hollow bone structure, and nothing says dragons wouldn't be able to do the same through convergent evolution. It's highly unlikely based on Earth life's track record, but not impossible. Or they're from another planet entirely. Though then we would have more convergent evolution to bullshit. Wait, hang on. 4 legs? 2 wings? Well, so what if I have a bit of dragon in the family? You're a monkey's uncle. Now, hollow bones don't necessarily make bird bones lighter, because the actual bone material in birds can be denser. In contrast, bats do not have hollow bones, but they have far less density to their bones, to the point where their skeletons are almost like cartilage. The advantage these hollow bones really give birds, and their dinosaur ancestors, is a complex and highly effective respiratory system. Air sacs inside their hollow bones allow them to have a circular kind of breathing and gain oxygen even while exhaling. This is very important if you are huge or need to power flight, or especially both. However, this doesn't really help you fly if you're built like a tank on legs, or if you don't even have any wings. So, how do they fly? For this, we turn to symbiosis. No, not that kind of symbiosis. I'm talking about gut bacteria. Mammals have a whole ecosystem of bacteria in their guts that help digest food. A notable byproduct of these bacteria is methane gas. What if dragons have gut bacteria that produce something lighter, like, say, helium or hydrogen, and a special adaptation allows the dragon to store this superlight gas in special air sacs? Suddenly, it becomes difficult to keep the dragons on the ground. Wing size and shape would serve their speed and maneuverability in the air, but they would not necessarily need wings for lift. Well, okay, the European Welsh dragon might, due to the sheer bulk, but the Asian dragons are much slimmer and lightweight. With enough helium, or especially hydrogen, they could go up like a balloon. And if they can control these gas sacs in a similar way to how fish control their swim bladders, they could adjust their height however they want. A winged dragon would probably beat them in an aerial dogfight though, but they can all get into the air is what I'm saying. This is silly, but I'm morbidly curious. How do you explain the fire? If they're storing hydrogen, they could expel the gas. Then all they would need is a spark. Highly dangerous, especially if there's some backburn. Exploding dragons are not pretty. But it's possible. They could also have a series of sphincters or ventricles or whatever to prevent backburn. Metal deposits in their teeth, either from within or from chewing on ore, could provide the spark. However, this would mean that the more fire they breathe, the less they can fly, which is an interesting weakness to play around with. Alternatively, they could scale up the bombardier beetle's tactic. have chemical sacs near their mouths, like venom sacs, with two different chemicals. Separate, they are harmless, but combine them and get a volatile reaction. Also with that method, different dragons could adapt different chemicals, meaning you could have one species that spits essentially napalm, one that spits poison, one that spits acid, perhaps even one that spits extreme cold. Any chemists watching who'd like to speculate on what concoctions the dragons could have and what effects they could give? Leave a comment below, I'm very interested to hear what you'd have to say. Last but not least, let's take a look at treasure. Yeah, treasure! It makes no sense that dragons would hoard treasure. No? You need look no further than birds to see examples of hoarding outside of the genus Homo sapien. Birds that collect shiny things to decorate their nests and attract a mate along with their singing. The bowerbird especially likes the color blue. So what would dragons collect? Whatever they damn well please! They're dragons! But some examples are gold, jewels, territory, constructions, people, magic, knowledge. And if you want silly and cute examples, do a Google image search for dragons with unusual hoards. That's all I have for you today. Remember, if you enjoyed this video, click like. If you enjoyed it a lot, consider sharing it around and subscribing to my channel. It really helps me out a lot and would make my day. If you'd like to see how I make the art for these vlogs, find me on Twitch and subscribe to me there, as I've started streaming when I draw. I've also got a Patreon now, if you'd like to support what I do beyond a simple like and share. You can also follow me in all these places for all sorts of updates and unique content. I'm Seleuf everywhere. Links in the description below. Off and away!